and good morning, everybody. It's great to be back in Antwerp for yet another NAV TechDays. You know, we always look forward at Microsoft, we always look forward to this conference. We do other conferences, but this one has a special place for us. And, you know, we're all passionate about technology, and we're developers, and it's a great opportunity for us. We always look forward to come here and engage with you, you know, developers, people from the tech community, and share our passion about technology. So I would like to start by thanking you. Thank you all for being such a great community, for supporting the product, and for being with us through, you know, all the changes, all the things we have done in the products. For some of you have been with us for many, many years, and we're really grateful for that. Our competitors are actually, you know, envious about having a community like this one. So, you know, big round of applause to you guys. Thank you very much. My name is Vincent Nicolas. I'm the Chief Architect of Business Central, and you know, as I said, we come here to share with you all the new things we have been putting into this product with this release around, and also share a little bit of what's coming. So we'll take a quick look into, you know, the future. But before we do that, I'd like to take a quick trip down memory lane, and you see behind me the various phases of the product through the years. You know, this is how the product has looked like. We changed the look and feel many times. We changed the colors, and we've done a lot of improvements, a lot of new technology adoption. And this is where we are today, with a beautiful modern client. And if you look at the colors, the color theme with this version we have today is teal, like in the green shade. And actually, the very first version of Navision was also teal. So you could say we've come full circle. And you know, if you like the blue color, maybe we'll come back to it at some stage. Who knows? So again, before we look to the future, it's you know, it's time to say goodbye to two old friends. The C-side and the Windows client, they are no longer part of this release, and they served us well throughout all these years. We love them. Sometimes we hate them, but that was the last time we had C-side and Windows client in the previous release. They're not part of this release anymore. We are entering a new era, a modern era. We've done a lot of modernization in the product, and the first thing I want to share with you, if you haven't seen it already, is our new logo, the new logo for the product. So this is the old logo, and this is the new one. I hope you like it. It's part of an alignment with other products at Microsoft. We have you know, some very experienced people in our UX teams who you know, look at all these things, and you know, they agree on what the colors should be, the shapes, and all that. And it's, trust me, it's a science. It seems easy, but it's not. It's pretty difficult to have all this consistency across product and provide a great user experience. So modernization is going to be a theme of this keynote. When we prepared this keynote, we were, you know, discussing, you know, what should be the theme throughout the different demo and the different things we want to talk about, and we figure out, you know, modern and modernizing is the theme. So last year you gave us some feedback that we didn't have enough technical content in the keynote, so we tried to, you know, we listened to that feedback, and we're trying to provide you more tech stuff this time around. And to do that, we are going to go through the stack, starting from the top, starting from the client, and we're going to go to the application, and then to the modern development, and we'll end up with a platform. We'll try to walk you through the stack and show you all the modernization we have made this time around. And we'll start with the client, and for that I'd like to invite Horina on stage. Horina is the group engineering manager for the client team, and she's going to show you all the great stuff they have done in the client.
Thank you, Vincent.
Here you go.
So coming back to the memory lane that we just seen, right? Some of us at Microsoft still remember shipping Windows Client in 2009. At least I do. I was part of that team. And that was an exciting release at that point. But this time around, we are saying goodbye to the Windows Client 10 years later and going through a similar process, entering the era of the modern clients, introducing capabilities that we have never had in the product before. And of course, the team has done a great effort, worked really hard to deliver this release with the passion for perfect, and not only at the UI, but also deeper down the stack at the architectural layers of our service. So a lot of thoughts and discussion, prioritizations went behind the scenes when engineering the components that power today many of the productivity features you will see light up in the product, and also performance improvement. That also has been another focus area for us. So in overall, we want to tell you, yes, we are ready for future with modern clients, but in the end, I don't think it's working. Yeah. But in the end, it is all about you, about listening to your feedback, about incorporating your feedback in the product, and about enabling you to rapidly develop business applications in cloud. So with that, I just want to start showing you the demos live and see what's new in Business Central. So let's find my PC. All right. So today, I will give you a glimpse of how you will interact with Business Central from now on. Whether you are a consultant visiting a customer, whether you are a heads-down user typing fast, performing your daily tasks, or whether you are a developer writing beautiful AL code. So for now, let's imagine I am a user that sees Business Central first time. Someone has sold it to me, so I have heard a lot about Business Central. I know Business Central is a comprehensive business management solution. And it's comprehensive, we call it comprehensive, because of all the functionality built by Microsoft and extended with your IP on top of that. And with all that value added for customers, it was time for us to enable individual users to discover and consume this functionality in an easier way. In this release, we have introduced the Role Explorer. Let me check first if I'm here. Yes. We have introduced the Role Explorer, which is available to you on the right-hand side of the navigation menu. And with a click, it emerges on top of the screen and presents me all the functionality that is relevant to my role, in this case, business manager role. I have here all the pages that I work with every day. I have everything I need to do in order to perform my daily tasks as a business manager. I can also, for example, navigate to these pages directly from the Role Explorer using mouse or keyboard. You can come back to the Role Explorer at any point, anytime you want, just using a new shortcut. And the shortcut is Shift F12. I think last year we had one favorite shortcut. It was Alt-Q about the Tell Me window. This time around, Shift F12. And if you still find yourself using Alt-Q for searching information, which I hope you do, note that Role Explorer is also available in the Tell Me window. So Tell Me window has become more powerful, and Role Explorer is just simply everywhere. Now, Business Central is an all-in-one solution, and that connects people and processes and unifies business operations across the organization. And that is why the Role Explorer allows me to zoom out of my own role and gives me a high-level overview of the functionality that's available across my organization. So I can, for example, go and explore other roles. I can explore the finance role. I have here the lists that I need to work with, the reports that I need to have access to. I can browse through various setup pages and so on. And the content in the Role Explorer is grouped, as you can see here, by roles. And the way we need to think of the Role Explorer and design the content for Role Explorer is as if it would be an elegant and interactive map of your customer's organization. But coming back to me, right? I am a new user, and I would like to test how flexible Business Central is and see if it allows me to define my own role. So let's go to the roles page. And here I have all the user roles available in Business Central. And by pressing New, I can start creating my own role. I can say, let's say what my role should be. I would like to have it maybe called expert user. Always wanted to be an expert user. So let's call it, let's put the caption. And I definitely want my role to show up in the Role Explorer. So let's check out these. And about the home page, I could change it to any home page I want. I kind of like actually Business Manager because it has, this role center has a very well organized content, very nice dashboards. So I'm going to just keep using it. And that's it. With these few clicks, I have created a new user role in the cloud without writing any L code. But behind the scenes, the service actually generates profile customization extension, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And for those of you who are familiar with Windows Client, probably many of you, and have worked with profile configuration, you for sure remember how complicated that was. A lot of command line parameters to remember, a lot of heavy XML manipulations, making sure everything is as it should be. This time around, the story is very simple. You press Customize Pages, and another browser tab window opens, automatically signs me in, and presents me Business Central through the eyes of the expert user, as you see here in the banner. So now I'm ready to customize my role. I have access here to customers, vendors, items, but I also work with sales orders list quite a lot. So let's find it. And I heard Business Central has actually a cool, innovative way to add content very fast to the homepage. That is through the bookmark icon. So by activating this bookmark, we will be generating a link, and that link will be added to the navigation menu in the homepage. Another important thing to remember about this release is the navigation menu has become fully customizable. So I can actually reorder my bookmarks here. I can, for example, move the sales order to be the first link. I can also do other customizations. Action pane has also become customizable, by the way. So let's, for example, hide the setup, since I probably am not going to do a lot of setup. I work a lot with reports. Let's see, customer statement is the one I use the most. So let's move it up here. I can also, for example, hide ongoing purchases. I'm not following so much on that. And that's it. I think I'm quite happy right now with my homepage. I can also continue customizing, and I can also, for example, navigate through other pages whilst I am in customization mode. So let's go to customers and check if I have here the exact view I expect. I for example, don't use so much the responsibility center. Let's hide that. I could, for example, make the content column a little bit more prominent, put it next to name. And I can continue more and more. Basically, everything that is available for users in personalization mode is also working in customization of your role. And now I'm ready to finish my customization. That's it. I close it, and I'm coming back to the profiles. And the first thing I would like to check, well, yes, I created a new role. With a few clicks, I have created a very custom, highly specialized homepage for my role, but does it really appear in the Role Explorer? So let's use our favorite shortcut and see if this is here. And it is. That's beautiful. So now, before we start using the role I have created, I want to show you another option we have available for roles. So I mentioned before that behind the scenes we will be creating an extension, right? A customization extension. And now we have introduced an action here that will allow you to export the roles created by users into a zip archive, and that will be downloaded on your machine. And you can unpack it, and as AL developers, you can actually tweak even further the customizations that were done through UI. And I have unpacked here for you in Visual Studio Code how the user-created profile extension looks like. Here we have the profile definition with the 3 configurations. I have also here, for example, the configuration for Business Manager Role Center. I can see here every single click I have done through the UI is here translated through AL. So I see the sales order list link, the fact that it's the first in the navigation menu. Customer statement report has been moved after payments, and hiding the setup menu. And same here for customer list, the changes to contact and responsibility center, and also hiding the ongoing purchases. So this is a very powerful tool, very powerful for consultants, right? You can basically tweak and customize the Business Central in a very easy way, but also is powerful for developers because you can go and tweak that even further by writing AL code. And before we move on using this role, I also want to talk about what was really the intent behind the role explorer and the role customization. And the intent was to enable you to tell your own story about Business Central, to demo the Business Central capabilities, not through PowerPoint, but directly in the product, in the client. You know, installing your apps from the App Store, creating the exact view that the customer expects to see with a few clicks in the UI without writing any AL code. So that was the intent, and you know, I hope you enjoyed this feature. It's really beautiful, and it's one of our favorite features this year. And now let's switch to the expert user role. Let me check here. So I'm here in the expert role. And yes, I can find here my customizations, sales orders, first link, everything looks good. And the first task for today is to rename a couple of items in the inventory. And you know, one of the, you could say, a little bit inconvenient things about working with items list is that the description of items is rather large. And it doesn't always fit the width of the description column. In Business Central, you can actually expand the width of the column, and it allow you to see the whole description, or you can simply double-click on the column and make it out of it the content of your data. And behind the scenes for this, we are generating a personalization extension at this point, which means that basically, if you come back to your system, after lunch, tomorrow, access it through different browsers, different machines, you will still find your preferred setting for the description column. But now, I would like to work with basically name the items. What I see here a lot of items. So I like to filter down the list, and let's filter it by number. Since I don't remember all the IDs of the items that I work with, I would like to use maybe a filter expression. So let's do that. My items. And I could also filter by other column, let's say costing method. Let's do that. And here we have the capability of basically filtering on multiple options. So let's choose both FIFO and LIFO. And I think that's it. I have the items that I need to rename. And now I can also save these filters as a view. So let's call it my favorite view, or my favorite items, yes. My favorite items. So whenever I want to come back to the items list and find the filters I have just saved, I can just simply navigate to this view and find all my settings here. And now let's see which items I wanted to rename. So I have created a couple of reminders for myself, like which one of them I should rename it on to what, actually. Notice that in the fact box area, we have two groups. That is the details and the attachments. And in the attachments, in this release, we have also introduced showing notes. I have here one note for the Athens desk, renamed to Antwerp desk. And I also have another one for Paris gesture, renamed to Antwerp, since we are in Antwerp. So that sounds very simple. Let's open the item card. And notice so far we have been working with Business Central in single task mode. But I want to draw your attention now on this icon here, very special icon, which does a very special thing, opens basically a browser window with the Athens desk. And I can, for example, open as many windows as I want. I can stack them on top of each other, show them side by side, have them on different screens, a lot of options. This time I will just put them side by side with the items list. Let's do that. And let's start renaming to Antwerp. And before I press enter, notice what happens on the list. So the description will get instantly updated in the items list. So now we have introduced synchronization between windows that are connected to the same entity. And we have enabled you to work concurrently on multiple tasks, without pages blocking each other. And you can also use this feature for other reasons, not necessarily for working concurrently, but also for comparing data in an elegant way. So multitasking is a very powerful tool for heads-down users. Again, it's very hard to say which one is my favorite, whether that is the views or the multitasking. So another thing I would like to show you is about views. I have, so you all know that basically views can be also created through AL code. and in Windows Client, we used to have the ability of having views of the same page with same filters but different layouts. And this option is also available to you in AL code in Business Central. So you can go and create a view with detached layout. You have the caption being set, let's say my special item view, filters and sorting, and I can, for example, hide the type column since all the items are type inventory. And then we should not forget to set this property, shared layout equal false. That will allow me to create detached views in the items list. And I have deployed it here on this sandbox. So let's take a look. So you can see basically sorting is by number and description, and it also has a different layout. If we switch to the views I have created through the UI, you will see the layout is different. We have the type column and also the sorting order. So that concludes my demo for today. And before we wrap up, I want to also talk a little bit about the modern client's journey. And we all started with being very excited and thinking, wow, we're going to make the web client proficient. Then we said, oh my God, there is so much work and so many ideas on the idea side, and it's going to be so hard. And then we went and worked really hard, write a ton of code, and in the end, we hope that we actually become proficient Ninja Cats in Windows, in web client, and you will probably forget about Windows client soon. All right, that concludes my demo, and let's come back to Vincent and see what other cool demos we have.
Thank you, Horina. So Horina showed you the client. So we started with the, as I mentioned before, with the top of the stack. Now we are going to go to the application to show you how you can write all these things, leverage the client through the app. And for that, I would like to invite Boxy on stage. Boxy is the group engineering manager for the application team.
Thank
Boxy,
you.
over to you.
So I actually think we have all the backup slides here, Horina. In case the demo didn't work. So let's skip to this part. Right. So you're absolutely right. We've been doing a lot of modernization in the application as well. Before starting talking about that, we actually wanted just to take a step back to what we talked about last year. Because last year we presented a long-term plan on how we wanted to modernize the application. And we want everyone that this is going to take time, right? We wanted to take the big old monolith in CAL and C-side to become a modern application platform. A platform that's highly componentized, extensible by partners, because that's the new way of writing code. You extend. High quality, obviously. And finally, we also want to put this as open source. So let's take a look at how far we got in this release. And when I'm referring to this release, it's the October release that was just released here. So we moved all the CAL code from obviously CAL to AL, moved our development environment from C-side to modern development environment. That was a big step for our developers. And there was some learning curve, but they actually quickly caught up and are fully productive in the new environment and are really happy about it. Especially the young developers we saw, really, really happy about all the new innovation going on there. We also moved the base application, the actual application, into one big extension. We sometimes refer to this as the mega extension because it is rather large. And that is the part we want to keep componentizing. We also created something we call the system application. If you remember from last year, we talked about that we wanted to componentize from the bottom up, right, and create a system application that could really have functionality that's applicable for every solution. And we did that. And this system application is one big extension today, but it actually consists of more than 40 smaller extensions. We call them modules, but for deployment reasons, when we deploy these, we don't want to install like 40 different extensions. So we actually just install them as one big extension. I'll talk more about that in just a minute as well. And then we have more than 30, I think it's actually 37 right now, extensions with local functionality or global functionality for W1 that's really componentized and pulled out of the base application. Finally, we also went through all of our tests and moved those to extensions as well. So now the way you actually run your test is that you install your extension, your test extension, and then you run it. So if you go look at the extension management page now, you can actually see two new extensions here. You can see the system application and the base application. And that is really where your application is today. And on top of that, of course, you have all the other extensions that are this. So there's no, application anymore. There's only apps. And that's a very important step to go. And actually, if you can actually try that when you get home, you can actually run with just the system application. The system application has modules for extension management. So you can install the base application on top of that and get going on that. Talking a little bit more about system application, because that really shows the path that we want to take for our componentization. So we pulled out functionality from the base application and put that into the system application. And we did that in a one-by-one way, and thereby fully componentized it and encapsulated the specific functionality for that component, making sure that everything was coherent. And we actually, for each of them, also created a facade on that component that exposes exactly what you need to use. So you don't need to think about the complexity that's inside the component. You should just use the facade which is intended for this. When we picked the modules or the components that we put into the system application, we focused a lot on security. And that is because we believe that security really belongs to a system layer. It needs to be locked down and should really be hardened. So we have enhanced security in a lot of ways in the components that we have added to this system application. All of the components or all of the extensions in that system application is fully versioned, of course, and it has stable public functions, so you can rely on them. You're not going to change them. They're actually also documenting. It's something that we haven't done in the past by documenting our AL code. It was actually forbidden in the old days because it needed to be translated. But now we have documented, and this documentation is of course available to everyone, so it's very easy to use these modules. And finally, we have of course also put the system application on GitHub. If you look at the modules that we currently have in the system application, you can see there's a large variety of different modules. And this is going to continue. We're going to continue to add modules to this. But it's really a broad spectrum of general functionality that every application will be using. And if you want to see the latest version of this, you need to go to GitHub, because that is the place where this is being maintained. So if you go to github.com/Microsoft/AL app extensions, then you'll be able to see them all right now. So what's next? Well, we're going to continue on the journey we started, of course. So we're going to continue to componentize the base application, pulling out functionality. But we want to be driven by the feedback we're getting from you, because we want to focus on what's most important for customers and partners to componentize. What do you want to reuse here? What should we extend, right? And the feedback for this, of course, goes into the same GitHub, AL app extensions. We also want to continue our journey on componentizing the local functionality. So, ideally, all our local versions will be just the W1 version and then a number of extensions. That is the end goal we are going for. Some of the functionality will be, separate features for separate, countries. Some of them will be, for multiple countries. So there'll be a lot of consolidation as part of that work as well. And then, of course, we'll be continuing to adding functionality to the system application, for new general purpose modules. So, it is not a secret that this release, the October release, or the official name 2019 Wave 2, has introduced a lot of breaking changes for you. So we changed the programming language, we changed the development environment. As we heard just before, we took away the Windows client. Now there's only the modern client, and I'm sure some of you had some scenarios that only ran on the Windows client. We're building the system application, which introduced a lot of breaking changes in the code. And we did a ton of other features that were also breaking. And that is not something we can continue to do. So in order to improve here, we are introducing a new deprecation model. So what that means is that any public element, and with element I mean, it could actually be a piece of code, right? So it could be a function, but it could actually also be a metadata element, like a control on a page, or a field in a table, or an action on a page. So any public element that today can be extended or used by an extension will now be in an obsolete state for minimum 1 year before we remove it. And what that means is that during that period, it will still work. And you can use it just as you've been doing before. But when you try to compile against this, you'll get a warning. It's not an error, it's a warning you're getting that at some time you need to start using the new way. And in that warning, you will actually see some guidance, and you can see that from the example here, that you'll get some guidance on exactly what to use instead. Right? So we're giving a good time to adopt all the new stuff. So we are going to make breaking changes, but we are introducing the deprecation model. So you have time to adopt, and we will not break you without you knowing it. But how can we even, get even better here? So we are creating, or have created, a lot of code analyzers for AL code that can detect breaking changes. They're actually in the code analyzer that we call the app source cop that we use for validating extensions that needs to go to the app source. And you can actually run that as well, because just as for us, it's important not to break extensions, it's actually also important for you. If someone depends on your extension, and you change some of the public APIs, you're breaking them, and you should not be doing that. In addition to that, we actually install all the app source extensions on every single build that we produce, just to validate that we are not breaking them. When you submit extensions today to app source, you're actually also supposed to submit automated tests for your extensions. And this is a really important step, right? Because if you submit good automated tests to validate the functionality, then we can actually start running these to validate that we are not breaking your functionality as well. Because the other checks that we just talked about is just syntactical check. If we accidentally change some behavior in the system, your extension might be broken anyway, and we want to know. And that's why you need to start building really good tests for this. And of course, all the tests can be built using the test framework. For per-tenant extensions, we'll be validating these on every build as well. And if you register for getting notifications, I don't know if many of you have done that already, you will actually get a notification if we happen to break it. So I really encourage, I want to repeat this because it's really important, you need to start building automated tests because that's your insurance. For us not accidentally breaking it, the functionality in your extensions, because it's really hard for us to ensure that we don't do that unless we have good tests for this. Because of course there's going to be changes. GitHub. So we are putting every extension with one exception on GitHub. And the exception is base app. And last night someone actually asked me, why don't you just put base application there as well? Well, base application is a pretty big extension. And when we put something on GitHub, it's actually because we want to give you the opportunity to contribute. And that's going to be really complex, with 20-something different country versions of this. So we're holding back a little bit with the base application. But for all the other ones, they're on GitHub, and you can actually today go contribute to these. So you simply clone the repo, make your modification, and do a pull request. Then some of our developers will be looking into the code and saying, you probably need one more test there, or you probably need to change this because it's not really following the good standards, or this is just super, right? Thank you. And we'll be shipping it in the next minor release. As something new, we're actually also opening up for now that you can contribute to new modules. In the past, it's only been that you could add functionality to the existing modules that we have up there. But if you want to create something completely new, which is not your core business, and you really want this to be part of the offering from Microsoft, then please go ahead and suggest those and do the pull request for those. So some of you might ask, so why should I, write code for Microsoft? Why don't Microsoft just write the code and, we use it like we used to do? Well, the matter of fact is that, it's been shown many times that having a large community of developers on an open source project like GitHub actually makes the product better. And I think that's in everyone's interest, is to have a great product. It actually also enables you to focus on your core business areas rather than areas that you always have to fix because Microsoft didn't put it into the product. So if you give that code to Microsoft and you maintain and ship that code going forward, you can focus on the core business areas that you're working on. Having shared code is also a good way of standardizing on the code. And it's a great way to learn. Many developers really learn from the code reviews that they're getting from other developers. Rather than going to training sessions, getting the feedback as you do it is a really important thing. We do that extensively inside Microsoft, and I hope you do that as well. It's really valuable. Finally, it's a lot faster. Right? If you want a change, you can wait for the next conference, talk to one of us, and hope that we'll remember when we get back, and eventually have something implemented for you. Well, I think it's a lot faster actually to go implement, and then the month after it will actually be in the product. So here's another successful project on GitHub. This is actually TypeScript, and I wanted to take that out as an example of a very successful GitHub project. So if you might recognize the name of the top contributor there, Anders Hejlsberg, the father of C#. And he's not only the top contributor here, but he actually stated that he would never do a major project again that wasn't open source, because he can see that the project and the product gets so much better. Right? I think we should take his word for it, because I think he knows what he's doing here. Finally, I want to talk about performance. We're running performance tests on Azure every single build to see if we are regressing performance. And what we're seeing is often something like this. And when I look at this, it's really hard to see if we have introduced a regression or not. There's clearly something good going on in in one of the scenarios, I think it's a create general journal line, which has been like 60% faster. That's fantastic. But for the rest of them, do you see a slight trend upwards, or is that maybe just a coincidence? It's really hard to say. So what if you had something like this? And that is what we've started to invest in. We started to invest in performance regression tests. The matter of the fact is that most of the time when we're running a scenario is actually spent on the SQL server. And if you measure the number of SQL statements, just the number of them, not how long they take, but just measuring the number of SQL statements, you will get a very good indicator on whether you have introduced a regression or not. So this is obviously not a measure for whether you have high performance, but when you have kind of accepted the performance that you have, and then you can see that the number of SQL statements are stable, then you see that your performance is actually stable with a very good probability. And of course, if it's going down, it's improving. If it's going up, you have a regression that you need to look for. So we have been doing that for a period of time, and this has really helped us. Because the reality is that a lot of developers, they work in one area, and they're not really aware of the impact that they have in another area. So a scenario that they might not even think about is suddenly getting slower. And that is something we can detect with this. And the good news is actually that you can do this as well. We have a session later today where we'll show more in details. But there's a new member on the session information where you can get the number of SQL statements executed. So you simply, in your test, count how many has been executed before you run your scenario. Then you run your scenario, and then you get the number again, and you subtract the two numbers, and then you know exactly how many statements has been executed for that test. So we built a small tool that will also be giving you that can show this. And you'll be able to see regressions using a tool like that. Another good scenario for this is actually to see what is the payload or the impact of the customization that you are creating. When you customize a product, you're of course adding code. You are adding SQL statements. And that's perfectly okay, right? As long as you know where you're impacting it. It might be just like any other change that you're impacting scenarios that you really didn't intend to impact. But that just makes the system overall slower. So a good practice would be to run this before, without your extension, and then run it again afterwards. So you can see what's the difference. That will give you a good indication of that. So that's how we have modernized the application so far. We're going to continue that journey to the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Boxy. So Boxy showed you all the, or some of the modernization we've been doing in the app, and we're gonna, continue our trip further down the stack, and we're getting to the modern development now. And we know, as developers, we know how important it is to have a state-of-the-art toolbox. This is where you spend most of your time using the development tools. And we're going to talk in that section a lot about AL. By the way, I love the speaker shirt logo this year. Is is Business Central adopting the C from CL, so there's only AL back. I think it was a great pun, Luke. So tooling, Visual Studio Code. This is still one of the most popular development environments. This survey is a recent one from Stack Overflow, and you can see that Visual Studio Code is actually the most popular development environment. And this survey has been done with 90,000 developers doing all sorts of development. So that was obviously a great choice for being modern and for the next era of development tools for Business Central. I'm going to talk about some of the things we did, but in the development tool set. But I will only be scratching the surface. There are other sessions at Tech Days that are going much deeper, because we've done so many things that there was just not enough time to show you everything we did. So I'll take just a quick view of what we have done. So workspaces is a feature actually of Visual Studio where you can, in Visual Studio Code, you can add more than one extension. You simply go and File and say Add Folder, and you can work with more than one extension in the same environment. So in this screenshot, there's an example with 3 extensions there, and you can save the workspace. And when you open it again, Visual Studio Code remembers that these are the extensions you work with. But it's not only convenient for having everything in one place. It's also handling project dependencies. So let's take an example. You're working with 3 extensions, 1, 2, and 3, and let's imagine that extension 2 is depending on extension 1 and extension 3, and extension 3 is depending on extension 1. The way you express that in Visual Studio Code is that you go in the app.json and you add these 2 entries in the dependency list, indicating that, so this is the app.json for extension 2, indicating that extension 2 depends on extension 1 and extension 3. By the way, if you look above the red frame, you'll see that extension 2 also depends on 2 other extensions, and these are the base app and the system application, obviously. So same syntax. And what happens when you do that, then Visual Studio Code takes care of deploying what needs to be deployed. So if you make a modification, if you do a modification to extension 2 and extension 1, for example, let's say you're calling a method in extension 1 from extension 2 and you change the signature of that method, then when you deploy using Control F5 or Shift F5, the Visual Studio environment will take care of deploying extension 1 and extension 2 as you would expect. If you don't want to deploy everything, there are ways to control that through the app.json file. You can prevent the deployment if you want to do that. But by default, the dependencies are taken care of by the environment. So great productivity feature when you work with more than one extension. Access modifiers. So access modifiers is a known thing from other languages like C# or Java. Most modern languages have access modifiers, and especially when you work with more than one extension, it's a great thing to have to prevent calling through APIs and methods that you are not supposed to share across extensions. So that's how you create stable API, protecting the things that you don't want to be public. So I'll let you read through the different type of access modifiers we've introduced. We have introduced access modifier for table fields and for objects like tables, code unit, and queries. And you can protect them using some of these keywords. They each have a specific meaning, protecting your code differently. If you don't specify any access modifiers, everything is public by default. So you don't need to do anything in your code today, but you just be aware that everything is public by default. And if you need to protect something, you need to actually specify the level of protection you need. Another great productivity improvement we introduced, we got some feedback from C side. You used to be able to do a small change in one object and just redeploy the object. We will inject that particular object into the database, and you can do a very quick turnaround time and work in a rapid application development kind of way. So we've introduced that feature in Visual Studio Code to emulate that. So what we do is that we try to keep an up-to-date cache of what you build and do an incremental build and just inject the code that you modify. And if you do Control Alt F5, so we'll only deploy only the necessary things, that only the changes you've made in the code. Just be aware that when you do that, that produces of course a fast iteration and a fast turnaround time. But we don't deploy everything. There are some artifacts that don't get deployed when you use Control F5, things like translation file, permission files, table data, web service definition, and custom reports. Layout. So if you need to deploy this one, you'll need to do a full deploy. But otherwise, typical development cycle, when you do some changes in code, you need to redeploy fast to try out the changes and test it, you can use Control-Alt F5. We've taken a new approach to translations. I think in the previous release, we already introduced, or even the release before, we introduced the XLIF files. So there's a new syntax for captions and labels, which looks like this. And you put them directly in your file when you have captions and labels. And if you enable the translation file feature, we will generate automatically the XLIF file, which is an XML standard, an industry standard for translation files. I'll talk some more about this in a session tomorrow at 9 o'clock, which is called Leveraging the Power of the Cloud, where I'll show you how you can actually do automatic translation using some of Azure Cognitive Services. But even without using translation services, you can take that file out, translate it by adding the target under the source to the file, and then we'll deploy everything into Business Central, and all the magic will happen. You can have as many files as you want in several languages, and when you switch to the corresponding language in Business Central, all the magic will happen, and you'll see the translated UI. Debugging without publishing. Control-Shift F5, also a new improvement we introduced. So Control-Shift F5 attaches the debugger to the actual Visual Studio Code launch client session. So that's a great also improvement if you want to, it's a great help if you want to debug without redeploying everything. Partner telemetry. So how many of you are familiar with application insights? Yeah, quite a few of you. So telemetry is a very important thing, especially if we're in the cloud. I'll talk some more about it at the session on leveraging the power of the cloud tomorrow. And what you can do from your extension, you can emit telemetry to application insight, and I'll show you how tomorrow in that session. But there's lots of things that are happening behind the scene in the platform that you don't have access to, information you don't have. And Boxy was talking about before on how many SQL statements get executed. Another interesting thing that you would want to know is how fast these statements are executed. And what we'll do from that release, from 15.0 and beyond, will allow you to come with your own application insight key. So you can go in Azure portal and create an application insight service and bring your own key. We call that feature bring your own app insight key. And we will emit to that application insight, emit some telemetry from the backend. And we'll start with emitting live insights about long-running SQL queries. And you'll be able to know, if you have a query that takes more than, a certain threshold. I think the threshold is set to 20 milliseconds. With the next release, we'll emit more and more information to that through that channel. We'll emit errors and report execution times and page load time. We have that in our backlog, and we'll keep adding some more as we go. So the way it looks, you would go into the Business Central Admin Center, and you would take your application insight key. This is a preview of the prototype we have. And you will add it, and it appears here. And from that point on, we will start emitting information to that application insight service. And if you go in application insight, you will get information like this. Here it tells you, for example, that there is a query, SQL query, that takes 26 milliseconds, which is above the threshold of 20. And you know exactly what query it is. That's the bottom frame there, red frame. And you can also see which code unit actually triggers that query. So great feature if you want to do performance optimization. So that was a brief tour of some of the improvement we made to the modern tooling. There's a lot more. So I encourage you to attend some of the other sessions we have at TechDays. You'll see there's a lot more we have added into this release. Now let's continue our trip through the stack, and now we're getting to the platform, which is even lower in the stacks. That's basically the lowest level. So I'm going to talk about the NST, the database, and other under the hood stuff in that section. So how many of you experience blocking number series problems? Yeah, so you're familiar with that problem. If you have number series and you have a lot of concurrent session, you experience blocking, which gives you bad performance. So we introduced a new AL object type called number sequence, which you can use from AL to generate number series in a non-blocking fashion. So it's fast, it's non-blocking. The only thing is that to make it fast, the numbers we're generating might not be consecutive numbers. There might be holes in the series, but they will still be unique and they will still be increasing as number series should. But that's the compromise to be fast. So it looks like this. You have this object called number sequence, and you call insert to create a new number sequence, give it a name, a starting number, and an increment. And from there, you just call next, and that will give you, on that number sequence, the next number. And you can create as many number sequences as you want, and you can also retrieve the current number. So that's for using it from AL. That's how it looks like. The number sequence, the number series in the product are obviously leveraging this backend. And if you have a number series that or you don't care about having consecutive number, then you can go in the UI and check that checkbox, and that you will have possibly gaps in the number series, but that will be non-blocking and a lot faster than the regular number series. So if you're not interested in having consecutive numbers, I encourage you to check these boxes for all the number series you have. You will get much better performance. Immutable key. All records now have a unique immutable key. Immutable keys are also known as surrogate keys, and you can see on the screen an example of how it can be used in a journal line page here. That means all records can be referenced in a unique fashion, and that's the syntax for it. You see, for example, here there's a path that references the system ID, the field system ID, and we guarantee the uniqueness of that key, and you can use it. It's great for integration scenarios, for deprecating integration records, and all this kind of thing. So another improvement at the database level. Talking about database, if you if you used to on-prem go and optimize the database, optimize the indexes, when we're in the cloud, obviously you can no longer do that because you don't have direct access to the database. But instead, SQL, we enable this great feature of SQL, which is automatic index tuning. And what it does, it's a fully managed intelligent performance service. It continuously monitors the database for the query you are making and use some intelligence to optimize the indexes. And it does it in a very smart way. It monitors a set of databases and find optimization, apply this optimization while the database is not very busy, and monitor the effect of this optimization. All this is happening automatically. And if for whatever reason this optimization is not providing the performance gain expected, then it rolls back this optimization. So it's all happening in the background. So this is aimed to replace manual optimization and indexes. And most of the time it actually does a better job than what you can do yourself. Page background tasks. I've saved the best for the last. So if you want to do long-running operations, you can now run them in the background while your page remains responsive. So how do you do that? You create, let's imagine you want to do some heavy calculation and you want your page to still be responsive. So you create a code unit, which I've called in this example background task operation, and in the on-run trigger you implement whatever code you need to run in the background. You can get parameters from the API, calling the get background parameter, and when you're done with the calculation, you can return the result in setting the result back on the page using the API set background task result. So the only thing you're not allowed to do in this background is write operation, but you can do anything else. You can read from the database, but you cannot write. And that's to avoid concurrency problems. Now, the way you trigger the background task in the page is as follows, as you can see on the screen. So you add whatever parameter you need to pass to the background task, and then on the page you just call simply enqueue background task, passing a task ID, parameters. There's the code unit number for the code unit that actually runs in the background. A timeout that will cancel the background if it doesn't complete within that time. And finally, an error level if some error occur during the execution in the background. That is the error level you can specify here. And when the task is completed, sorry, let me go back to the slide. When the task is completed, you get a trigger on page background task completed where you can actually read the result. And if an error occurs, you also get a trigger. So that was a brief also overview of the things we implemented on the server side and in the backend in the NST and in the database. So now we're coming to the last section of this keynote, which is the From the Lab session. I know this session is quite popular. So in this section, I will try to give you a sneak preview on what's coming in the future release. And disclaimer, what I'm going to show you now might or might not make it to the product. It might make it in a different form, but we'd like to share with you the things we have on the drawing board and the things we are working on, so just to give you an insight of what's coming. So the first thing is on the client, and we call it ghosting. So what is ghosting? So let me try to give you a little bit of a background and why ghosting is interesting. What happens when we show a page in Business Central is all these things. There's a lot of things happening. So it starts on the NST. Let's say you click an action that's going to open, say, the customer card. The first thing that happens is on the NST, we get the base page metadata, and then on that we apply the profile. Horina showed you all the things you can do with the profile. So we apply the profile and the personalization that you have. Then we apply the language in case that page is translated. Most of the time it is. We apply the application area to hide and show whatever needs to be done according to the application area you're on. We apply the license information, and then we serialize all this to XML. Then we send it over to the web client service. We're still on the server side, right? We deserialize this from XML, build the logical form. So the logical form is basically a logical representation of the UI. And then we reserialize again to JSON and send it over to the browser. So that goes over the network through the browser. And in the browser, we deserialize the JSON, create the adapters. So the adapters are objects which are translating the JSON into real control. That's where the UI is created. In that case, in the browser, it's HTML. In the old days, in the Windows client, that would be WinForm controls. And then finally, we apply the data and show the page. So that's a lot of operation. That's the price to pay to have a metadata-driven type of UI, right? So the idea with ghosting is that most of the time, so first time you are going to show a customer page, you need to do all that, obviously. But the next time, if it's the same customer card, it might be different data, but all the rest is the same controls. So a lot of these operations we don't need to redo. And the idea is to cache as much as we can, basically pretty much everything until the rendering of HTML and before we apply the data, and cache all these on the client side in the browser. So this is basically what ghosting does. We only get the data, serialize it to XML. It's a simplified version of it, but that's the idea basically. It goes to the web client, and then only the data gets over. And we deserialize the JSON, and we get the HTML from the local cache, and we just have to apply the data. And the reason why it's called ghosting is because, you know, while we're getting the data, to get a better perceived performance, we can show the HTML with a ghost image of the data, basically with the field grayed out. And that gives the user an impression that the product is very responsive. And while the page is displayed, we get the data in the background and apply the data on the page. So I have a small video to show you how that works. This is a prototype we have done very recently. When I'm going to start the video, you need to be attentive what's happening. So in this video, the user is clicking and opening a customer card 4 times. The 2 first times it's real speed, and the 2 last ones, the video runs at half of the speed, just to give you the time to see what's happening. So you see here, when the customer card opens, you'll see the page right away, and there's some gray shading, and data is applied. Just one more time. It's pretty quick. Now, the next time, it's going to be a half speed, so that will give you the time to see, you know, how it works. The page opens right away. There's a gray shading disappear, and then the data comes and gets applied to the page. One last time. So this is basically the idea behind ghosting. So that's probably going to come out in, yeah, I would say the next wave, I think. So that was on the client side. CDS integration. We've had a lot of requests for improving our entire CDS integration story and our integration to sales. So we have very recently made some changes to improve that story. And the first thing is to improve the connectivity story and the way you connect and you set up your connection to CDS. We have a new page. We will have a new page where we will discover whatever CDS environment you've created based on your identity. So you don't have to copy around URLs from the Power Apps admin center. We'll fetch them for you automatically. So very easy way to set up your connection to CDS. And this is how the page is going to look like when your CDS connection is set up. Then I will walk you through 2 scenarios regarding CDS. One is how you map entities, so generic mapping of entity, and I will take an example with the BC employee mapping to a worker entity in talent. And then I'll show you another example after that, another scenario, how to extend the same entity just by adding 1 field. So I hope you can see the code here, yeah. So the first thing to do when you want to map the worker to the worker from CDS to the employee in BC is to create a proxy table. And you do that by running a command line tool, which will be shipping with the product. And that generates the code that you see here. We'll also have in Visual Studio integration, Visual Studio Code integration story, where you'll be able to do it directly from a Visual Studio Code command. So once you have created the proxy table, you need to write some mapping code. First, you need to map the BC table to the proxy table. So that's how the code looks like. That's where you tell which table maps from BC to the table in CDS. Then you need to apply the filter, a proper filter to the integration table. You create the field mapping here. In that case, I think I'm mapping the name of the employee from one table to the other. And finally, you need to create a job queue to process the mapping. So this job queue is going to take care of synchronizing the entity between CDS and Business Central. And in that case, it's a 2-way synchronization. So that's one scenario. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy way to do the entity mapping. Now, let's take another scenario. If you want to add a field to the talent worker, let's say you have an extension, you write an extension which needs to add a shoe size field to the worker entity, to the employee entity. So you extend BC, as usual, you add the field to the table in your extension. And then you need to generate a proxy table for that extension as well. And this proxy will only have the field shoe size, right? And you do that by again running the command line tool. You add that to your extension as well. And finally, you need to subscribe to the field mapping using the same API. Sorry, I was a little bit too fast here. Using the same API than before. So this is very, only like 3 steps, not many lines of code to do a pretty straightforward field extension, where you'll get all the synchronization of this field, the value of this field between the two systems. So that was CDS. The next thing I want to talk about is an experiment we have going on right now, which is about read-only replicas. So the idea is, when you create a SQL Azure instance in the cloud, you get 2 databases. There's a primary replica, which is used for reading and writing to the database, and there's a secondary replica, which is read-only. And the idea is, when you write things in the database, it takes longer, obviously, than when you read, because the database needs to take care of, the data consistency, make sure you can roll back the changes. So obviously, there's some indexes to maintain. There's a lot more things happening when you write than when you just read. So it's always faster to read. And the idea is that if you're only going to do reading, then you would use the secondary replica, and you will keep reading and writing using the primary replica. So that's basically the idea beyond that. And what we want to do is introduce a programming model on certain objects. In that example, a page. If you create a page and you know that this page is only going to do read operation, you would have a keyword in AL specifying that, and we will take care of sending all the SQL operations to the read-only replica, which will give you improved performance. So this is an experiment we have going on now in production. We are observing, how it works. We're observing the performance and making sure there's no side effects, and we're actually having the performance gain that we expect. But if that turns out to be a good experiment, if we get good results, we'll of course ship that. So finally, I saved the best for last. There's a few new language feature we introduced that I would like to demo to you, and I'm going to go over to my other computer here. So interfaces. I'm sure you're familiar with the interface, the concept of interface from other languages like C# and Java. I've had this feature for a long time. And we will very soon introduce interfaces for AL as well. So it will look something like that. I have an example here where I have an interface which I call iVehicle. And it has a single procedure called getMaxSpeed, which returns the vehicle. And I have another interface here called iShippingContainer. You can imagine that describes, some kind of vehicle that can transport something, and it has a procedure called getCapacity. Now, the way you use this, I have a code unit here called car. So car is a vehicle. So I would go and say, that car implements the iVehicle interface. And when I do that, you can see the red squigglies appear here. That means that I haven't implemented the procedure that interface defines. And it tells me so. It tells me that the car does not implement the interface member getMaxSpeed. So I can do a quick fix here and have Visual Studio Code generate a skeleton for me, which implements the getMaxSpeed here. And I would just have to return, whichever value I want to return here. And so the way you would use it, there's a code unit here where I actually use an interface here. And you see this procedure here takes a parameter of a type high vehicle. So I don't know whether it's a car or if it's a bike, what type of actually code unit is behind that. And when I call get max speed on the some vehicle variable, the magic happens. Obviously, we will call, if it's a bike, I would get 40, and if it's a car, it would return 220. I will call the right method, obviously. So that's how interface work. We will also be supporting multiple interface. So the next example here is a truck that is both a vehicle and a shipping container. And obviously, when you declare the truck as implementing both interface, you need to implement both methods. And if I, suppress one, you'll see that Visual Studio is reacting right away and telling me I need to implement iShipping container. So that's coming soon. And interfaces are great because they open up for really a lot of interesting scenarios, like dependency injection. You can do things like you can have a great separation of concerns, and there's tons of things that are really great with interface. And one of the things we will be using interface for is solve the problem of extensible enum. And I'm going to try to walk you through how we propose on solving that issue. So we introduced extensible enums not too long ago, and the problem is as follows. Let's say you have in the base application, or in an extension that is below you, the extension you depend on, you have an enum. In that example, it's let's say you implement an airline loyalty program. You have an enum called loyalty level, which defines 3 values: bronze, silver, and gold. And you have, let's say for, depending on which level of loyalty you have, you get discount for, duty-free purchase. And if you have bronze, you get 10%, 50% if you're silver, and 20% if you're gold, right? So you would have some code, maybe some code looking like this, applying a discount, and a case statement returning 10, 15, or 20, depending on which level you're on. Otherwise, it would return 0. If you don't have any of these loyalty level, you don't get any discount. So pretty straightforward code. I'm sure you have lots of code like this. Now, if you want to extend that enum in another extension, and you want to add a diamond level, you would imagine that a diamond customer would have, let's say, 25% discount. Now the apply discount code doesn't work anymore, and it will return 0 all the time. And you don't have any way, if it's not your extension, if it's in the base app, you don't have any way to modify that code. So that's the problem. Now, how do we propose solving this? So we will try to leverage interface for that. And let me walk you through the syntax here and how that would work. So in that example, you would need to define an interface called, let's call it iLoyalty benefits, which returns a procedure called getDiscount. Then I have my enum defined there as before. And then for each of the values of this enum, I will need to define a code unit which implements the iLoyalty benefits interface, and then in turn implement the getDiscount procedure, which returns the proper value. So I have the bronze returning 10, and so forth, right? Then I need to specify that my loyalty level enum implements the iLoyalty benefits interface, make it extensible, and for each value, I will declare which code unit implements that particular value. Hope you're with me so far. So the code I had before, the apply discount code, would no longer need to make use of a case statement, but it would look something like this, where you would simply assign the level, the enum, to a variable of type iLoyalty benefits, and you just need to call the getDiscount methods on this, and I will do the magic and call the proper method. So that code is equivalent so far to what I had on the previous slide, without interfaces. Now comes the extensibility part of it. So the way you would extend that code adding the diamond level, you would, so the black background is supposed to illustrate that now I'm in another extension. I'm not in the base application anymore, or any extension that I depend on, but that's my own extension, and I want to extend in that extension the enum. I would declare an extension which is diamond, and I will declare that the implementation for this value is in that code unit, which returns the value 25, leveraging the interface. And then the magic is that if you do that, the apply discount code will work exactly as expected. I don't need to change it. When I call the level.getDiscount method, I will automatically, if it's a diamond, I will automatically call the proper code unit. So the 5124 in that example. So this is how we propose to solve the extensible enum problem, leveraging interface. So this is called a strategy pattern. If you're familiar with design pattern, basically the idea is to give each enum a strategy which it applies when you use the actual value. So that was a brief tour also of the things we have in the make, the things we have on a drawing board. Again, I'm pretty sure this will make it to the product, the extension and interface thing. We're pretty close to having it fully baked. So I hope you look forward to this, and we certainly think it's going to enable a lot of great scenarios and solve some of the problems we had before. So before we conclude this keynote, let me talk a little bit about the roadmap. I want to give you also some idea of where we're going strategically with the product. So we've been, releasing Business Central in October here with focus on service fundamentals, the modern client, VS Code, NAL, and enhancing migration tools. In the upcoming releases, the main theme will be, more AL languages, more AL language features, more developer productivity. We'll only get started with that. There's tons of things we can do in Visual Studio Code to improve your productivity. We keep receiving your feedback, and we really look at it, and you should keep giving us feedback. And we always take a lot of these input and put it back into the product. We'll improve application extensibility some more, as Boxy talked about in his section. Reporting is going to be focused. We know that we have issues around performance. Performance is always a big thing with reporting, and we have some ideas on how we can improve that as well in the platform. And extensibility as well. Today, the report extensibility is a little bit painful. You have to make copies of reports. So we have some ideas also on to make that story a lot better. Productivity on the client. Horina showed you some of the heads down scenario improvements we made for heads down scenario. We'll continue on that and do some more. And finally, telemetry, which is a crucial thing when you are in the cloud, but also on-prem. Telemetry can be very useful. Finally, we'll keep investing. We spend a lot of time, maybe it's not very visible for you guys, but we spend a lot of time on making our service a world-class service, making sure it's resilient, making sure it's performant, and making sure that we can scale as we get more and more customers, and the service being a world-class service. A few resources. We have a lot of text, not a lot, but we have some samples, some sample code in a GitHub repository at this address, so Microsoft/BC-Tech, and we keep adding new samples there. We have a tech blog when we publish every now and then some technical articles where we talk about things would fall a little bit outside of the regular feature of the product, because these are well documented. But check it out. There's a few articles there that I'm sure you'll find interesting. We've tried to start a new Twitter hashtag called BCL Help. There's been some activity on it already. So the idea is if you have questions about AL, post it there, and we'll try to get this community going and get people to answer you and help you. Finally, I would like to thank you again for supporting us, supporting the product, being such a great community, and you should look forward to this conference. Look as lineup, great sessions again this year. So please enjoy. Thank you very much.